All right, everybody, welcome to another one of our weekly LT sessions. I am Arianna Boulet. I am the Customer Success Manager for North America, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We also have Liam and Brandon and Gabrielle that will be talking with you guys kind of in the background and helping me out that way. Today, we're going to go over some of the questions that you guys had sent us previously before this webinar. And we'll also, after a couple of the questions, we'll leave it up to you guys to maybe chat amongst each other, depending on how many attendees show up today. But you can raise your hand and I'll be able to unmute you guys to kind of join a conversation that way. And if we still have time towards the end, I was going to hopefully show you guys some of the new features that are coming up here soon. So thanks again for joining. I'll go ahead and get started here. And so just diving right into it, one of the questions that we got before was if it is possible to incorporate live data gathered from the lab to the students in real time. So this is absolutely possible when you're going to be using the data acquisition and Power Lab in lab. So the students can do the hands-on data recording inside of the lab. The way they would do this is when they open up their LT module, and they would go into the lab. The lab lesson is actually going to take them through step by step how to set everything up, the different procedures. We also include videos on how to do the equipment setup. So the students will be setting everything up in order to do the actual recording. And as soon as they get to the exercise or activity page, this data panel will show up here. They'll be able to hit that start button, and then they will actually be doing live recording, and the data will be recorded live. So this absolutely is possible when they're inside of the lab. Doing labs remotely, that's not necessarily able to do live recording, but we do have example data for that for remotely. Okay, another question that we had was if it is possible to copy and paste a full table from Word and paste it into the LT table panel. So this is also possible to do within LT. So I'm going to go back to my home page here so I can get into editing mode. I'll go back to my admin view, lessons, and I'm just gonna choose a random lesson here. We'll do Airflow Lab. Open. So now this is going to take me into preview mode for my lesson. I'm going to click on editing mode here. So if I have a table in Word, which you'll see I've created right here, I can go ahead and copy this table. And I would then paste this into Excel. So I will go hit there, copy that table into Excel. I can then hover my mouse over until I get those little cross arrows there, and I can drag and drop that onto the page. You'll see where that blue line shows up there, right, and hover over the cogwheel. It will ask me what type of panel type I want it to be. So I can either choose table or table question. So I'll go ahead and hit table. And then you can double click on it and edit it from there. So you can still add columns or add rows. You can also make them header rows or header columns if you want. So that definitely is possible for you to be able to copy from Word into Excel, and then from Excel you can fast drag into LT. Another one of our questions that we had, what options are there for remote labs? So we do have example data for all of our labs. Our labs are designed to be completed in the lab, but we've been able to include example data so they can be used remotely. So just to show you an example of how you would want to set this up, I'm going to go back to my home page here. In order to set it up kind of on the back or admin side, you would want to go to your course and go down to settings. Under settings, I would scroll down into lesson report setting, or I'm sorry, example data settings. And this drop down menu, I want to make sure that it's on by default. So if my example data is on by default, then when I go in as a student remotely, so I'm at home and not necessarily in the lab, I would open up my lab lesson here. You'll see they will still have the same procedures, same pages as they would if they were doing them inside of the lab. But when they get to the activity page and the analysis page, that example data will automatically show up for them. And then when they go onto the analysis page, they'll be able to use that example data for doing the analysis and filling out the tables and graphs and things like that. So again, most of our content for now is made to be used in the lab, but at this point now with the example data, these labs can be done remotely as well. I wanted to take a moment right here. I wasn't sure if any of you guys had any other suggestions on how to do remote labs or what you guys are using for remote labs. So if you guys want, there should be a little raise your hand feature under the Zoom bar there. So if anybody else has anything to share on what they're using for remote labs, we can share with the rest of the group. Maybe not. That's okay. I thought I'd just open that up and ask. It's always nice to be able to share between each other and kind of give each other ideas. Moving on, another question that we had was the difference between an auto-graded versus a manually graded question, as well as how the different types of assessment questions we have. So I'm going to show you here the difference between an auto and a non-manually graded question. So if I'm going to go back into admin view, I'm going to open up a lesson here. I'll just open up lab again, or the airflow lab. Oop. And open. And when I go under the different panels, when I'm in editing mode here, under panels, my internet's a little slow, sorry guys. Under question panels, so these are the different types of questions that we've included. The automatically graded questions are going to be the multiple choice, categories, drag and drop, and labeling. So text or short answer questions, uploading and annotating an image, table, spreadsheet, and graph questions are going to be manually graded. So LT won't be able to recognize the correct answer for those, and you and or your TAs or other instructors will have to be grading those manually. I wanted to show you as well the different assessment types you can have for each question, whether it is auto or manually graded. So this is an example question we have right here. By default, we set all of our questions to be just instant feedback, which means the students can answer the question. They'll have this check answer button here where they can see if they're right or wrong, and will immediately get instant feedback. So you'll see I know which ones are right or wrong. And by default, we allow them to be able to try as many times as they want. So again, I can hit check answer and I can keep trying. There are a couple other options you can do for question assessment as well. So if I double click on a question, the 4 types of assessment are in the bottom left corner of the question. So one option is no assessment. So that's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. A popular question or something for this would be something like, how comfortable do you feel with this material? Or what were some of the topics that you struggled with within this lesson? So there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer that the student is going to get. The second one is instant feedback. So that's the one that we just went over. What you can also change within instant feedback, if you edit the answer, you can uncheck multiple attempts. So now if I go back to OK, done, and preview, the students are able to answer. But you'll see now when I go to get my feedback, or when I go to get my check my answer, I have to commit my answer, which means I only have one attempt and not multiple like I did before. So as soon as I commit, I'll see the feedback if I'm right or wrong. I'll hit OK, but now you'll see it's grayed out afterwards, which means the student won't be able to go in and answer it again or try again. The third type is going to be graded. So this means that there is no feedback for the students. You will notice, however, when I hit graded, that there is a 1 point value up here in the top right corner. I can hit edit answer and change the point value if I want to however many points I feel that it's worth. I'll hit OK and done. So now if I hit preview, the student will answer the question. You'll see the point value is there so the students know how many points it's worth. But you'll notice that that check answer button is no longer there, which means the students aren't going to know if they're right or wrong until you, as the TA or as an instructor, grade them, or until they commit their answer. And if it's an automatically graded question, it will give them the correct point value. The final question assessment type is instant and graded. So I kind of like to think of instant and graded as a combination between instant feedback and graded. With this option, there's still a point value assigned, so I can always edit answer and change the point value to however many points I want. The students will be getting feedback, and they do have the option of multiple attempts or just one attempt. So I'll start with multiple attempts just for this one. I'll hit OK. Done and preview. So you'll notice the student will answer the question. The point value is still up in the right top right corner. Now they have that check answer feedback button back. They'll be able to see the feedback if they're right or wrong. And since I allowed them to have multiple chances, they can continue to try and answer until they get it correct. If I were to put the instant and graded, edit answer and uncheck multiple attempts, and then hit done, everything is the same. Except now when I go to check my answer, I have to make sure and commit my answer. It'll still give me that feedback, but now it is grayed out, which means I cannot try again, or the students are only able to try one time. So the next question we have is how we can combine two LT lessons or add pages from one lesson to another. So my suggestion when doing this is to have two tabs open side by side. So I would want the lesson that I'm copying from open in editing mode on one page, or on one tab, excuse me. And then on the other tab, I would want to open up the question, or I'm sorry, the page in editing mode that I'm copying to. So let's say that we are going to copy, let's just say a page from the pre-lab into our lab. So I open up my pre-lab here. I'm going to click on editing mode. So that takes me into editing mode for the pre-lab. I'm going to make sure up here on my airflow lab that I'm also in editing mode. Looks like I am. So I can go down here to pages, copy page. You'll see that paste button now shows up here. I'd go into the other airflow lab or wherever I'm copying the page to, and then I would hit paste. And now that page that I took from the airflow pre-lab prep is now in the airflow lab. If it doesn't show up at in the right order or the right spot within the lesson, you can always go down to pages, reorder pages, and then move around the page to where it's supposed to be. So rather than having to copy over or create new pages, copy over a bunch of different panels, you can just copy a page from one lesson and put it into the other. So it shouldn't take you too long to merge two lessons or even three lessons together. All right. Another question we had was on using some of the a link to the lesson that you can put in an LMS, so your student can actually just click on the link and it will take them directly to the lesson. If this is something you want to do, you would want to go through the admin side, if my internet would work here. We'd go to student work, so all of the lessons and modules that we have published are going to show up here under student work. I would click on the module and then the lesson I want to get the link for my students. So maybe it's the blood pressure, flow, and resistance. Go with this gear drop down menu up here and get link. So I can copy that link and paste that link into my LMS or whatever learning management system that you may have, and the students can then access it that way rather than logging into LT and getting to it that way. So they can just click on this link and it will take them directly to their lesson and they can get started that way. All right, so before moving on to new features, we do have a question that says, can we include our own example data? Is there a way to save data and import it as data that can be analyzed for the students? So this is definitely possible, Kristen. Thank you for your question. You're able to, if you were to use Lab Chart, and I don't know if I have Lab Chart on my desktop, you'd be able to save that as a settings file from Lab Chart, and you'd be able to record your own example data that way. As soon as you save that data file from Lab Chart, and your, let's say, we'll go back into blood pressure here. I'll go into the blood pressure lab. Oh, sorry. Blood pressure lab and open. There's a couple ways you can use that data file that you've recorded in Lab Chart, or example data, sorry. So if I go into editing mode, and I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna use the blood pressure activity here. I can actually go down here to panels. And under panels, I could go to Power Lab. I could use a read-only data panel here. I could drag that onto the page. If I double click on that and hit add data here, I could then search, and again, I apologize, I don't have a file saved on my desktop, but I could search for that data file that you saved from Lab Chart, and it would show up here on the page where your students would then be able to analyze. And that would just be a read only, so they wouldn't be doing any recording. If you wanted to include your personal example data in a data panel where they are recording, what you could do is you could go to that data panel. You would double click. You'd want to change it to, it would have to be graded or instant and graded. Edit answer. Then change data. So as soon as you hit change data, you're going to choose that sample file or data file that you got from Lab Chart. And that's what will be put in as your example data. You'd want to hit OK. After that, you can change it back to no assessment or leave it as graded. It just is up to you, and then hit done. But as soon as you do that, you'll be able to use that example data that you've personally recorded from Lab Chart in LT. And I'd be happy, Kristen, to kind of go over with you or make another video when I actually have a data file, but I apologize, I don't have one on here right now. Okay, are there any other questions before I move on to some of our newest features? Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the home page and actually go into my instance here. So one of our newest features we have is model answers, which is going to be really helpful when doing the grading for both you and your TAs. So I'm gonna go to my showcase and get to some data where we have some grading we can show here. So now when I go into student work, and I wanted to do the grading for the atomic structure, I'll go down to grading and open this lesson up. You'll see now that there's a View Model Answers tab up here in the top left corner. So when I click on this, a new tab is going to open, and it will take me to a view of exactly what the students did through the lesson with all of the correct answers. So this is great when referring back to the, when doing the grading and getting to refer back to the question. So for example, a question could say something along the lines of, you know, please comment on the image below. Now you'll be able to actually see that image that the students were referring to rather than just the student's answer when you weren't able to see the image, if that makes sense. And you'll always be able to go back and forth this way, or that tab will always be open on the right-hand side of it, so you can kind of refer back and forth. Another new feature we have that I think is really exciting, we've been asking for quite some time, rather than having to go question to question when grading for one student, you can now, if you click on the first question for the first student, you can do the same question for each student. So you'll see I can just scroll down and do that same question for each student. I can still do an individual student and go through all of the questions, or I can do one question at a time. So hopefully that will help you guys when doing the grading as well. Another new feature that we have is we have merged Cura grading and PDF grading. So rather than you guys having to choose to do the Cura grading online or having to choose only PDF where the students will print off their PDF, you now have the option of making it so the students can, or not the students, excuse me, so that you can have both of those options. The way you'll set that up is when you're under your course, you want to go down to settings. I'll scroll down, lesson report settings, and you want to make sure that this check mark of students can download a PDF of their report is checked. If this is checked, the two options you have now are, like I showed you before, if you go to student work, you'll be able to grade them through Cura grading, and this is just the image we saw before. So this is how you can do one type of grading, but you can also now, the students also have the capability to print off their PDF. So I'm going to go as if I was a student here. I'd be able to go into my lesson. And as soon as I'm finished with my lesson, I would go down or to the last page under report. And as soon as I commit, I'm going to have the option to download my PDF. So this is really nice. Rather than you guys having to just choose one or the other, you have both options. You can do Cura grading within the platform. The students can still have the option to download their PDF. They can also upload their PDF into your LMS. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. Another grading improvement that we did is now you can do non-assessment grading. So in the past, you were only able to, let me see if I can. In the past, you were only able to use Cura grading if you set a point value to each one of the questions. So you'll see, if I go, I'm gonna go back into my admin view. And I'm gonna go in as if I was grading. Again, so down to grading, grade revision. So by default, our questions are set to just be instant feedback, which doesn't have a point value assigned to it. So in the past, you would have to have assigned a point value to each one of the questions in order for LT to recognize that that was a question to grade. Now we have the option to show non-assessed questions. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but you'll notice a non-assessed question shows up over here on the right-hand side. And so this is a question that we didn't set a point value to before the students did the lesson. So I can actually still click on that question. You'll notice that there isn't a point value down here, but I can still give them a point value if I think that that's what they deserve. I can still give them any feedback. The answer to their question will also show up here. So this is really nice. You don't have to set up beforehand point values to every single question. You still can if that's what you want to do, but there's a bunch of different options that you can do now for assessed and non-assessed questions through the Cura grading. One of the but another nice feature that we now have is that you can comment within the example data. So I'm going to go back to my, sorry, I know I'm jumping all over the place here. Back to my module. I'm going to open up a lab. In the past, when you would use the example data, you weren't able to put any comments within that data. So now, when I'm on that activity, I can actually use my point selector here, the name of the student, add, and I can also scroll through. Let's say maybe Liam was also one of the students. And you can just do it that way rather than not being able to add them in the past. These comments will carry over now to that next page when they're doing the analysis. Okay, so that's the main new updates that we have right now. I'm not sure. I'm gonna look and see if there are any other questions we have at this point. I think we went over the example data. Again, Kristen, I'll be happy to show, send some more information on how to put the example data in from LabChart. I don't have that file ready right now, but I'll definitely follow up with you for that. Let's see. So are there any more questions? I guess, let me see, there's one. Bear with me, I'm trying to figure out this raising your hand thing here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to figure it out. I'd be happy to ask or answer any of the other questions that you guys have. I'll be following up with you guys with this webinar. And then, yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to go over them with you individually and send you more information that way.
Hey, Ari.
Yes, hi, Brandon.
Hi. Burhan had a question about professors being able to access other subjects. So I didn't know if maybe you could show him the content library and how he could go about accessing that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon, for helping me. No problem. So when you're in your course, I'm going to go back to my home page here. Once you're in your course under admin view, or even if you create a new course, there's going to be this import LT content button here. So you want to go ahead and click that button there. All of the different collections that we have will be listed over here on the left-hand side. And then the modules within those collections over here on the right. So you can import just individual modules, or you can import an entire collection all at once. So if I wanted the entire anatomy collection, I can just go ahead and import that whole collection. Like I said, and you won't be importing per lesson, you will be importing the entire module. So you'll see this is the cardiovascular system module with 3 lessons. As soon as I import that, that module is going to show up within my course under modules, and then each individual lesson will show up here. I hope that answered your question. Are there any others on the back end that I can't necessarily see?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. We're going to have another one of these answering your questions.
Actually, so we do have a question. Greg, I'll allow you to talk if you want to ask your question live. All right, Greg, put you on the spot. If you want to answer your question now, or ask your question, sorry. Sorry, Greg, we can't hear you. You might have to type it out, and yeah, we'll have to answer it that way. Tell us a joke, Ari.
I'm sorry, I don't have any. I know. That's okay. I see Greg on there in the chat. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and type that out, Greg, I'll keep an eye on the chat so we can answer it that way. Does anybody else have any questions? You could do the raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, and I can answer them for you that way. I wanted to mention to you as well that we're going to have 2 more Q&A sessions next Thursday, and then the following Thursday. So Liam will be doing one, and then Tom from Europe will also be having one of these sessions. I always like to put or mention as well the support site that we have that you guys will have under your account. So in the top right corner where your account is, we always have the support option here. This takes us to the support site. There's a bunch, there's a beginner's guide, a bunch of videos and other resources. And then The other thing I highly suggest is joining our LT community, where you can connect with other LT users globally. So not only from North America, but Australia, New Zealand, Europe, South America. It's a great way to communicate with other LT users. Okay. Okay, so I see a question from Greg about student licenses. It says, if a student buys a license, can they use it for other courses? Or do they need to buy a license for all courses? We have anatomy labs and biomechanic labs, different modules and such. So if a student buys a student license, if it's within the same semester, that one license can be used for multiple courses. So if I was a student and I was taking anatomy and physiology and then a biomechanics lab, I would just have to have or purchase one license, and I could still be enrolled in both of those courses. I hope that, okay, awesome. I see that answered your question, Greg. Anyone else? Like I was saying, if you come up with a question or something pops into your head after this afternoon, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be following up with you guys with this webinar. That way you'll have my email address to respond back if you have any questions. But I really appreciate you guys joining me today. We'll have a couple more of these answering your LT questions in the upcoming weeks. And I hope you and all of your families are safe and healthy and getting through this crazy time. But thanks for joining me, and we'll talk with you guys soon.